John Steinbeck, A History of the 1930s Through His Stories.
I realize now that everyone was caught in the same trap. If you remember, we had a depression at that time. The depression caught us without the ability to take care of it. It took a long time for us to develop the agencies to take care of such economic difficulties. When the dust came up, people were starving and they had no place to go.
Social and political events during the 1930s were a huge influence in Steinbeck's writing. He worked alongside people who later became the characters in his books. This is evident in Of Mice and Men, the story of two itinerant workers struggling to make a living in California by working odd jobs. In Dubious Battle also takes place in California during a fruit picker strike, and The Grapes of Wrath takes the reader back to the journey of a family making their way to California to get away from the Dust Bowl that was destroying the Southwest. Steinbeck struggled to make a living too during that time and created his characters from the people he met during those difficult times. In the early 1900s, people moved to the plains to farm the fertile land. For years they reaped the benefits of abundant crops and everyone prospered. Then in the early 30s, the rain stopped falling and a drought swept the land. No thought was ever given to soil conservation, so when the winds came up, they blew away all of the precious topsoil. These winds and drought and the resulting effects lasted for 10 years and were dubbed the Dust Bowl. Many people were forced to pack up what little they had and leave their farms to look for work. Thousands of displaced agricultural workers and their families headed to California to become migrant workers in the state's many orchards and vegetable fields. It is known as one of the largest migrations in American history. It is estimated that between 300,000 and 400,000 people left their homes in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri to settle in California. In 1936, George West of the San Francisco News asked Steinbeck to do a series of stories on the Dust Bowl migration. It was during this time that Steinbeck met Tom Collins, an employee for the Federal Resettlement Administration. Steinbeck met him at the agency's Weed Patch Camp in Kern County. He traveled with Steinbeck, visiting various camps around the state of California. Collins became the inspiration for the manager, Jim Raleigh, of the Weed Patch Camp in The Grapes of Wrath. Steinbeck stayed at Weed Patch Camp for several days, talked to people and read Tom Collins' reports, and sent his own stories to the San Francisco News. The two men traveled around California visiting other camps. The Grapes of Wrath was conceived from these reports and Steinbeck's experiences with the people living in the camps. He wrote about their poverty, homelessness, and despair. The book enlightened the rest of the country to the plight of the migrant worker. A worldwide depression was going on during the 30s. Massive unemployment plagued the country, and unlike today, there were no social programs in place to offer aid to people who were out of work. A lot of people were invested in the stock market, so when the market crashed in 1929, many ordinary people lost all of their money. Many had borrowed money to invest in the stock market, so not only did they lose the money invested, they also still owed the money they borrowed. John Steinbeck was born in Salinas, California. His father was a bookkeeper and an accountant and the treasurer of Monterey County for several years. His mother was a teacher and shared her love of literature with her son. His two sisters used to read to him constantly. Some of his books borrowed their titles from famous literary works. In Dubious Battle is from John Milton's Paradise Lost. The Grapes of Wrath takes its name from the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and Of Mice and Men is taken from Robert Burns' poem To a Mouse. Steinbeck attended Stanford University from 1920 to 1926, but did not graduate. He took only classes that would help him become a better writer. He also studied marine biology and helped his friend, biologist Ed Ricketts, collect samples. He supported himself by working manual labor jobs which allowed him time to write. He also took jobs as a sales clerk, farm laborer, rancher, and factory worker. He spent most of his life in Monterey, California, but in 1925 traveled to New York by freighter via the Panama Canal. He worked as a reporter and as part of a construction crew building Madison Square Gardens. He returned to California the following year. Steinbeck married Carol Henning in 1930. She was an intelligent woman and critiqued and painstakingly typed Steinbeck's works. It was she who came up with the title for The Grapes of Wrath. They struggled financially at first and lived with Steinbeck's parents in Salinas. In 1934, his mother died, and John and Carol cared for his father until 1935, when he too passed away. The couple divorced in 1942. Some of Steinbeck's most famous works during the 1930s were The Red Pony, 1933, which takes place on a ranch owned by the family of a childhood friend. Tortilla Flat, 1935, is about a group of jobless Mexican paisanos living together near Monterey. In Dubious Battle, 1936, tells the story of a fruit picker strike in a California valley. Of Mice and Men, 1937, features two friends running from farm to farm in their pursuit of the American dream. The Long Valley, 1938, is a collection of short stories set in the Salinas Valley, where Steinbeck was born. The Grapes of Wrath, 1939, is the epic tale of the Joad family from Oklahoma who flee their home to find the Promised Land. John Steinbeck was an avid recorder of American history throughout his life. He lived and worked with the people he wrote about and saw firsthand their sorrow and their joy. Steinbeck won the Pulitzer Prize Fiction Award for The Grapes of Wrath in 1940. In 1962, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. His desire to fight for the common man led John Steinbeck to write some of this country's most important books. In his writings, we see history through the eyes of the people who lived it.
They went toward California. They came in their thousands to California. And what they meet? They met a people who were terrified, number one, of depression, and were horrified at the idea that great numbers of indigent people were being poured on them to be taken care of. They could only be taken care of by taxation. Taxes were already high, and there wasn't much money about. They reacted perfectly normally. They became angry. When you become angry, you fight what you're angry at.
I'm blowing down this road, dusty road. I'm a blowing down this old dusty road.